Jason Tatum gets injured and the Celtics have a new owner. The Patriots get a new coach and surprised everyone. And the Red Sox finally get back to the playoffs. Boston Globe Sports Report's Year in Review starts right now. Welcome to the show, everyone, and happy holidays. To end the year here, we're going to do a year in review on Boston Globe Sports Report. We're going to have Bob Ryan in to talk about the year in sports here in Boston, Emma Healy to talk about the year in women's sports, and of course, we can't review a year in sports without the great Dan Shaughnessy joining me here today. All right, Dan, after further review, you know what? There were no duck boat parades here in Boston this year, no championships, but a surprisingly monumental year in sports for all four professional franchises. Why don't you start with the Red Sox? Why was it not just business as usual for the Red Sox this year?
It did. It got a little bit better this year. Again, first playoff appearance since 2021, and a team that was more interesting and more exciting for the fans than anything since they won the World Series in 2018. So they came in kind of flat spring training. It got better right away. They traded for Garrett Crochet, gave up 4 minor leaguers, got a guy who finished second for Cy Young. You know, Alex Bregman is brought in for big money. It turned out to be a 1 year with an option deal. So it was a good year, but it was good to add him to the team, gave him more credibility. And then Aroldis Chapman, this closer they bring in for 1 year, he had a career year, and this is a guy who's probably going to the Hall of Fame as a closer. So those things were good during the season. You know, Rafael Devers' trade was a seismic deal for them, which was getting rid of their biggest contract, their star player, and they played better after that. Not because of that, but they did play better after that. He went off and did pretty good things for the Giants in a bad year for him, better offensive numbers than anybody the Sox had, but they felt that they got rid of the poison in the clubhouse and things got better. They really got better because Roman Anthony came up and added a lot to the team, a future star. Roman Anthony is going to be a star. Take that to the bank. They end up winning 89 games, which was great, exciting. They play the Yankees in a one-round playoff, 2 out of 3. They lost 2 out of 3. They lost the third game after winning the first game, didn't have enough hitting, need to go back to the drawing board and do better next year.
Yeah, it was a disappointing end to a mostly fun year down at Fenway. I go down to Gillette Stadium, and man, what a crazy year it's been for the Patriots. It began in chaos. They beat Buffalo in Week 18 back in January. Joe Milton leads the win. Everyone's booing them because they blow the #1 pick. The Crafts fired Gerard Mayo before the season, the body's even cold, 20 minutes after the season. And I have to give the Crafts a lot of credit. Every move they've made since then has turned to gold. They hired Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels, total home runs. And the Patriots, they're back, man. They are a return to relevance this year. Drake May is a superstar in his second year. The Patriots had a 10-game win streak. They are battling for the #1 seed. They're potentially winning the AFC East. Just a monumental year for the Patriots. They're back. No one expected it coming off of 2 4-13 seasons. Has to be one of the biggest surprises in sports. Dan, a different sort of year for the Celtics, monumental nonetheless, but not as much positivity as the Patriots.
Yeah, it turned the wrong way for them. We were expecting a succession of championships with the 2 J's, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and then they end up playing the Knicks. They're the favorite, second round of the playoffs. They lose in 6. They lose 2 games at home when they were ahead by 20 points. They get themselves in a horrible hole, and in Game 6, Tatum tears his Achilles. He's circling on the floor, writhing in pain. So he's gone for a long time. And then the dreaded second apron of the CBA comes in with the basketball. New owners have to say, oh, we got to pare down payroll. They lose Porzingis. They lose Holiday. They lose Cornette. They lose Al Horford. Tatum's gone with the injury. So it's a rebuild. It's a gap year. They're surprisingly better than we thought. They're third in the conference as we head into the new year. But it turned in a bad way for the succession of championships we were expecting.
Yeah, I don't think anyone expected the Celtics to be out in the second round. And I don't know how many people expected the Celtics to have a new owner either. Wick Grossbeck selling the team to Bill Chisholm. So we'll see what the future of the Celtics holds with new ownership. And, of course, the Bruins, they didn't make the playoffs, but it was still a pretty monumental year for the franchise. They traded Brad Marchand, let him go to Florida and win his second Stanley Cup. They fired the coach. They brought in Marco Sturm, who's got the team rolling right now, having a really good start to the season. And then Morgan Geekie and Pasta are having an electric start to the season. So a nice start, at least for the Bruins, after a tough end to last season. Okay, on this show, instead of a hot take to end the year, we're going to remember the Boston sports figures we lost in 2025. The baseball world said goodbye to former Red Sox Mike Greenwell and Commissioner Fay Vincent. The Patriots lost former players Don Hasselbeck, Steve Corbett, Len St. Jean, and Steve Kiner. The nonprofit world suffered a huge loss with the passing of Susan Hurley, whose platforms helped raise countless millions for cancer research and other causes. And then there was the unspeakable tragedy in January involving the Boston Skating Club, with 6 members of their community among the 28 athletes, coaches, and family killed in a plane crash. 2 rising stars in the skating world, their mothers, and 2 coaches, all gone way too soon. We offer our sincerest condolences to all who have lost. We'll be back with more after the break. Welcome back to the show. And if we're going to recap the year in sports and we're looking for a little perspective, who better than the man they call the commissioner, who's been covering Boston sports for over 5 decades? The great Bob Ryan joins the show. Bob, thanks for coming. To recap 2025, now we're going to do it superlative style, okay?
All right.
I'm going to ask you a few questions here. First off, at the top, what do you think was the most impactful sports story of 2025 here in Boston?
Well, that's pretty easy. It was the return to prominence of the New England Patriots. After a couple of off years and people not forgetting, nobody forgot what was going on the first 20-some years of the century, but yearning for them. Everybody thought they might be better, and they got the schedule. Oh, boy, they got the schedule. And they got a new coach, and it was great signs of the quarterback turning into somebody special. And both of those guys get A+ on their resume so far this year. And the Patriots are back and have regained supremacy in this town. And let's face it, football is America's pastime in the 21st century, and we're right back in the mainstream of that discussion now.
Yeah, no question. No one expected the Patriots to have such a great season. It felt like old times at Foxborough. The place was rocking. A really fun season, and I think a sign that Boston has really become a football town now. Number 2, what was your top game of the year here in Boston?
Well, I'm sure that beating Buffalo was very, very impactful for people. But for me personally, and games I actually attended, Friday night, September 26th, the Red Sox are playing the Detroit Tigers. If they win, they will get back in the playoffs for the first time since 2021. And the game was riveting. It was why we love sports. I remember it was euphoric, and they win the game on a rarity of rarities, a walk-off triple. We all said walk-off singles. We've seen walk-off walks. We've seen walk-off errors. We've seen walk-off doubles and homers. You never see a walk-off triple. But that's what we had. And with Rafaela, who after Romy Gonzalez singles in the 9th inning in the tie game, he hits one, and the ball is heading to center field, and we're thinking, hey, it might go out. And I know Alex Cora thought it was going out, but it didn't. It hits off the wall just above the outstretched, glove of Parker Meadows, the center fielder for the Tigers. Bounds over to right field, and Gonzalez is able to score from first, and Rafaela is on third. The crowd, I'm telling you right now, 37,052. Can anybody ask you? The crowd was absolutely ecstatic. It was so much fun, and walking out of there and walking down the street with people, it was my moment of the year. And one other thing, two other things about that game. They were down 3-0, and they come back with single runs, 3-1. Then they got a single run in the 7th, single run in the 8th, and then the game-winning run in the 9th. And meanwhile, 6 relievers combined for 2 hits and no runs, making the manager look very smart. We're always complaining about how they manipulate relievers these days. Well, on this particular occasion, Alex Cora pushed 6 proper buttons to win that game. So that's my memorable game of the year.
Yeah, definitely capped off a really fun year. A fun fall down at Fenway Park. All right, Bob, what was your transaction of the year in Boston sports?
Number 1, Garrett Crochet. That turned out to be a wonderful acquisition. I would say the first runner-up would be Stephon Diggs, and I would say I had another one, but I've forgotten. But of course, Alex Bregman. Alex Bregman was a very instrumental part of the puzzle, and let's hope that they can keep him. But clearly, Crochet turned out to be, if not everything they wanted, 98% of what they thought they were going to get, they got out of Garrett Crochet, who's 26 years old and figures to be the ace of the staff for several years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I know that maybe they're not players, but I would argue Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels have been the transaction of the year.
I wouldn't argue that. I wouldn't dispute that at all. I was thinking more of player acquisitions that were not present at all. And of course, Vrabel qualifies in that regard too.
All right, Bob, moving on to the 4th question here. What was your biggest disappointment in Boston sports?
Well, it was the fact that the Celtics flamed out, and they did. And that they, overall, unable to defend the championship with the same roster, really. And but it wasn't the same year. We know Porzingis had the illness, and that really was very, very significant. But You don't like to lose, and then losing to the Knicks. You don't like to lose to the Knicks. That's never going to change. So that was a disappointment that they weren't able to do it. Simple as that.
Yeah, and Tatum's Achilles too. Just a brutal way for the season to end. All right, well, let's cap it off on a more positive note then. What was your top moment of the year in Boston sports?
I'm going to go back to, for me, frankly, it was that game in September with the Red Sox, because it was culminating a rise. Remember, they ended May under 500, and it was doom and gloom around here. Nobody was thinking playoffs, believe me. And they captured our attention as the season went on. I won't, and I think they became very, very enjoyable to watch, and I don't think I'm alone in saying that. And then this capped it off. So, they did it. They're back in the playoffs. I don't think anyone thought they were going to win the World Series or anything else, but it was nice to be back in the postseason, and I have to revert back to that. That was the moment, and I'm telling you, I can't exaggerate the feeling in that ballpark. And I've been, been to a few. Since I first went to the first Red Sox game in 1963, but this was a really electric moment, and it was just so much fun walking out of there.
That's tremendous. All right, Bob Ryan, thank you so much for your insight. Happy New Year to you. Coming up next, more Year in Review with Dan Shaughnessy, who's going to be the next New England team to bring out the duck boats. Welcome back to the Year in Review, and Dan Shaughnessy. It's been 2 whole years since we've had a championship parade here in Boston, a real drought here in the City of Champions. The question I put before you today, who is the next team to have a duck boat parade in Boston?
Well, let's not offend anyone. It's possible for any of them at this point. That means you too, the Bruins. That means the Patriots could still get to the Super Bowl. That means the Red Sox could win the World Series next year. But I think that the Celtics, they're my best bet to get back in the winner's circle. They were there in 2024. Some bad things happened. I have faith in Brad Stevens rebuilding the roster. You wonder about Jason Tatum. I don't think the Celtics will be in contention this year. They're surprisingly better than we thought, given losing all the players that they lost and Tatum being out for maybe the year, probably not the year. My guess is Tatum's going to come back and play, and they'll be a representative in the playoffs this year. The Eastern Conference is not that good. But I think a year from now, they're serious NBA contenders again. Brown and Tatum still in their primes. The supplementary people that Brad Stevens brings in to fortify the roster. I'm putting the Celtics down for the 2027 NBA championship.
Jaylen Brown's going to be a couple years older at that point. Jason Tatum is going to be coming back from Achilles. And Dan, who's the supporting cast for the Celtics? I mean, if they couldn't do it last year with Porzingis and Drew Holiday, what's to say that they're going to have the supporting cast in a year or two from now?
Well, Brad Stevens is to say, and he's already given you better players than we thought they would have. Cater's a good player in the middle. Simons has been okay. And, let's not forget, Peyton Pritchard, 6th man of the year last year, has been a good guy in a starting role. And Derek White's still another stud. They have 3 studs, counting Brown, Tatum, and White.
Yeah, you make a good point. And the Celtics are a good choice, but I'm actually going with the Patriots. And not this year. I was this close. I wanted to a couple of weeks ago. I wanted to pick the Patriots to go all the way to San Francisco and win the Super Bowl. That loss to the Bills, I think, showed us who the Patriots really are. A good team, but not a championship team. But I think they have the best chance at a Super Bowl in the next few years because they have what you need in the NFL. They got the head coach in Mike Vrabel, and they got the quarterback in Drake May. And that's really the key piece. I think what they have in Drake May now, only in his 2nd year, I mean, the sky is the limit, to use that old cliche. He's only 23 years old, but to me, he's playing well beyond his years. The team has gotten so much better, I think, because Drake May has raised his play this year. And as long as they can keep Josh McDaniels around too, which I don't think he's going to be getting any head coaching jobs anytime soon, I think Drake May and Mike Vrabel are the duo that are going to carry the Patriots to a Super Bowl within the next 5 years.
Well, the only qualifier for that is next year they're not going to have the cheesy schedule that they've had this year. They played these horrible teams with a winning percentage like 35%. One after another, tomato cans lined up. Looks like the draft for next year, the teams they're playing. So that won't help them next year. They will have a stronger competition. They'll be in the playoffs, I think, the next couple of years. So as you say, anything's possible, and they're legit. When you have the coach and the quarterback in the NFL, you're legit.
Dan, we got 20 seconds. We bind the Red Sox as contenders.
Well, I think I'd like to see them do more. I don't like the way they're constituted right now. There's not enough punch in the offense. There's not enough infielders in this team. It's a dysfunctional roster. They're constantly playing 4A players and minor league players and dumpster dive players. No, that lineup they put out there against the Yankees was pathetic in the games that mattered the most in the playoffs last year. Do better.
True, although baseball is the sport where a team can just get hot at the right time. All right, for the final slam dunk to end the year, I've got to give it to the Patriots for bringing Josh McDaniels back for his 3rd stint as offensive coordinator. Now, McDaniel's brand of football didn't really take hold in Denver or Las Vegas, and his coaching style isn't for everyone, but he's been a perfect fit here for the Patriots. And McDaniel's is proving this year that he's not just a product of Tom Brady. Drake May has blossomed into a superstar under McDaniel's guidance, and the Patriots offense went from one of the worst in the NFL the last 2 years to now one of the most explosive. Mike Vrabel and Drake May certainly deserve all the credit they're getting for the Patriots' turnaround this year, but let's make sure that McDaniels gets his due too. All right, now we're going to move on to breaking it down, and this is a great segment. We're going to bring on the Globe's Emma Healy now to talk about the year in women's sport. Emma, how would you sum up the year overall in Boston in women's sports?
It was a huge year for women's sports in Boston. You know, you talk about momentum of women's sports across the country, and that you certainly saw that here locally in Boston. You start off the year with the women's college beanpot at TD Garden. A huge game for women's college hockey there. They have 13,000 fans in attendance at the TD Garden. Just a huge game, broke records for attendance for women's hockey. And then you look at the Boston Fleet. Last season was their second season in the PWHL. They sort of flamed out there at the end of the year, lost 5 of their last 6 and got eliminated from the playoffs with an 8-1 loss to Minnesota in the final game of the year. Coach Courtney Kessel leaves in the offseason, and they hire a brand new coaching staff led by Chris Spar, who was a longtime assistant in men's hockey, and he totally turns around the team. They're 4-0 to start the season after a huge roster overhaul in the offseason, and they're looking really good to start the year.
Emma, tell me more about the Fleet and just the Professional Women's Hockey League in general. I think they're in their 3rd year now. Where do you see this league taking off now?
They've had a lot of success in the first 2 and some years of the league's existence. The Boston Fleet, like I said, are off to a really hot start. They've had a lot of success in the league. They made the Walter Cup final their first season. And it's just been really great to see the increased number of fans, the growing number of fans at all their games this year. And
I believe most of the players are probably going to be playing in the Olympics in February. So that, I would think, would be a great platform for the league also, and for the women to get their names out there and get some publicity. Also, a big year for women's sports in soccer. Tell me about that, Emma.
Yeah, so the Boston Legacy FC will start up as part of the NWSL in March. It'll be their first season in the league. A huge, exciting return of women's soccer to the Boston area. We had the Boston Breakers here for a while that folded, but now are sort of being resurrected. Boston women's soccer is being resurrected through the Legacy. After this season, they'll play at Gillette Stadium. They're going to play at a renovated White Stadium, which will be a huge, huge boost for women's soccer in the area.
Yeah, no question. And then can't forget, probably the biggest event was when Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever played the Connecticut Sun at TD Garden. What was that event like?
It's always a huge deal when Caitlin Clark comes to town, but a phenomenal game of basketball between the Indiana Fever and the Connecticut Sun at TD Garden. It's the 2nd year in a row that the Sun have sold out the Garden, and it brought a lot of momentum for women's basketball in Boston. There's a lot of calls for a team coming here, whether it's the Sun playing more games at the Garden or getting a permanent team in Boston. A lot of women's sports fans and women's basketball fans have come forward. Even our governor, Maura Healy, is on board for having a women's basketball team in Boston.
Yeah, it blows my mind, Emma. We got about 30 seconds here, but why is there a team in Connecticut, and why does Boston, of all cities, not have a women WNBA team?
Well, that's what people are saying. There's a lot of chatter about why this is in a small market when it could be in this huge market, and even Sadia Rivers, who plays for the Connecticut Sun, said something to that degree when we were talking at the game in TD Garden this year.
Yeah, it's a great sports town, obviously, Boston, and a great women's sports town. So to me, it's a huge opportunity loss for the NBA not to be in Boston. Oh well. Emma Healy, thank you very much for that update on women's sports in Boston. All right, coming up next, Dan Shaughnessy and I are going to review our top Boston Globe sports articles of the year. Welcome back to the show. And Dan, we usually call this next segment Saved You a Click, but these are things we actually want you to click on. We're going to review the best Boston Globe sports stories of 2025. Dan, you go first. What was your most memorable article that was in the paper?
My man, Alex Spear, Stat Masterson, came up with a beauty back in January on the Red Sox going to the sophistication of driveline technology for their entire organization, how they're that much smarter than everybody else. They're talking about hit tracks and biomechanical reviews, intended zones. It's skull-imploding data, which is what drives the Red Sox. And I'm waiting for the flux capacitor, which we brought out to measure all this stuff. And then fast forward, in spring training, Jim Rice is kicked out of the batting cage for trying to tell one of the young hitters what to do because we don't teach that here. We don't teach hitting line drives by one of the smarty driveline guys. So the great Alex Spear, great teammate we have, does this wonderful story. Made my skull implode, but it's important to tell you what they're up to in Red Sox training.
Absolutely. So I hate to be a little conceited. I'm going to choose something that I wrote back in August. I ventured down to Chapel Hill to spend a few days there and get the vibe of Bill Belichick and him coaching UNC. And I wasn't quite sure what to expect when I showed up to the football facility and saw the coach. But you know what? He gave me about 15 minutes of his time, was very gracious. We talked all about, not really all about, but he gave me some quotes when we talked about college football. And frankly, he gave me the quote of the year. I asked him a very basic question. What's the difference in coaching college football? And he immediately launches into, there's no owner's son, which is, man, what a shot right at the crafts. And obviously that's something that has continued throughout the year, the barbs back and forth. So Bill Belichick and that disaster at UNC this season, to me, that was one of the top stories of the year. Dan Shaughnessy, what else do you have?
Really important story done by Kevin Paul Dupont of the Globe. Went down to the South Shore to see Alice Cook, one of the great reporters in Boston sports history, the greatest woman athlete in Boston sports history for about the 30 years that she worked at Channel 4, Olympic figure skater from 1976, longtime correspondent for Channel 4, Patriots, Red Sox, Bruins, Celtics, all that. Alice has been afflicted with ALS and is incredibly brave and incredibly heroic and started the Boston Marathon last year. And Kevin Dupont went down there and our video team went down there to put together a piece on what it's like to live with this horrible disease, this unspeakable disease, and to fight back. And Alice Cook, God bless you. Have a good new year in 2026.
Absolutely. Wishing her all the best, of course. Okay, Dan, let's wrap things up now with our Hail Marys. One last prediction for 2025. Going into 26, what do you got for us?
How about Roman Anthony as MVP of the American League? Fred Lynn did it in 1975 when he was a rookie. Anthony's in his second year. He is a star in the making. He will be a star this year. I'll make him MVP in 2026.
All right, that's a good one. You know me, Mr. Positivity. How about this prediction? All four teams are going to make the playoffs. I feel really good about the Patriots. The Celtics are going to grind their way to the top of the Eastern Conference. The Bruins are definitely going to grind their way into the playoffs. And you know what? Let's call it the Red Sox are going to get into. Okay, thank you, Dan Shaughnessy, Bob Ryan, Emma Healy. Thank you to everyone who have watched. Happy holidays. Have a great 2026. This is Boston Globe Sports Report.